Welcome to Halfway There. I'm Eric Nevins, and with me today is my friend Jimmy Jones. And Jimmy, he is a youth minister to children and youth in underserved communities, and he's going to share a lot with us about how he got there, how God brought him to that place. So, Jimmy, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
I'm really glad to have you there. We've been talking about this for a while. I've known you for a while, and I really do admire the work that you've done. I've heard you talk about that before, and it'll be great to dig into and see what God's using you for.
All right. No, I'll be glad to share it.
Excellent. That's what I want to hear. So why don't you just tell us a little bit about who you are and what you're doing now, and then we'll go back into your story and see how God brought you here.
Okay. All righty. Well, as you mentioned, my name is Jimmy Jones. I am a youth minister for a local ministry called Cornerstone Family Community Ministry. We are a ministry that serves unreached, underprivileged inner city kids in the Denver area as well as Sheridan area.
Okay, great. Sheridan is what is part of, it's kind of a neighborhood, or is it its own city? It's kind of
it is its own city.
Gotcha.
It's more of a southwest area from Denver.
Gotcha. Yeah. Perfect. Okay. And so tell us, where did you grow up? Because if I remember right, you're from, is it Texas?
No, I am actually a native of Colorado.
Oh, you
I was born and raised. Yeah, I am. I was born and raised.
Okay, go ahead.
I was born and raised in Denver in the 5 Points neighborhood, and spent my whole life down in that area until I moved to Texas in '97.
All right, so you were in Texas at some point.
I was in Texas, yes.
Very good. I didn't just pull that out of thin air, which has happened before. Okay, so you grew up in 5 Points. Now, can you describe 5 Points for people who don't know what that neighborhood represents? Well,
5 Points is a name given to an area in Denver where five communities come together, and it's east side, East Denver, and it pretty much runs from, if you're familiar with the area, from like 34th back to 20th, 23rd Avenue, and then from York back to I would say Welton.
Okay. So, but it kind of has like five different, like you said, neighborhoods, but there's kind of different streets that all come together in kind of one place.
That is correct.
Yeah, and that's where the thing I remember about 5 Points is this was the place where like all the jazz greats that when they would come to Denver, they'd play at the hotel for all the white people, and then they would go over to 5 Points and play at the bar, right, for everybody else until 2 a.m. or 4 a.m.
Yeah. My understanding is that the 5 Points area, back in the day, it was the area where it was primarily an African American neighborhood.
Right.
And so you are correct. It's jazz clubs and kind of like the arts and all of that. But again, growing up from what I've heard and kind of studied, it was definitely primarily African American neighborhood back then. But of course, that has all changed.
Yeah. Well, it's being gentrified now, isn't it?
That is correct. That is correct. Definitely. Just gentrification has kicked in, and it is definitely not the neighborhood that I grew up in. Growing up in that area.
Yeah, what was it like when you were growing up there?
It was someone coming from the neighborhood, growing up in the neighborhood. That's all you knew, so it was a great neighborhood. There was the summer of violence in the 80s, early 90s, where the gang activity was pretty rough down there. And at that time I was a teenager, living down there, and so that's kind of my background, if you will, is, I had to come through all of that.
What do you mean come through all that? Like you just had to deal with it, or you were part of it?
You know what? I had to deal with it, and there were times when, yes, I was a part of it. When you live in a neighborhood and when all of your friends, that you hang around with, they become family, if you will. And so, as a teenager, the neighborhood that I lived in, the Five Points, that was considered the Crip territory. And so, yes, I, hung out with them. We ran the streets together. And so, yes, as a teenager, yes, I was caught up into a lot of that street warfare, if you will.
Wow. Was that seems like it would be scary.
Uh, you know, yes. There's nothing like being, a young kid, walking down the street and always having to look over your shoulder. Always, knowing that, there's another, uh, uh, you know, rival gang member out there, driving the streets looking to harm anyone who isn't wearing a red rag. And so,
Wow.
yes. So, growing up, in those times, in the early to mid '80s, yes, it was pretty rough. It was a pretty scary time.
Wow. Okay. So how did you come to Christ?
Um, I came to know Christ actually at a summer camp, and how that came about. When I was younger, there was a local pastor. He would come down into my neighborhood, and he would drive up in this van, and he would pick up a lot of kids, and he would take them out of the neighborhood to his house, and he would, um, sit down with them and, share the gospel. And I always, wanted to go. And just kind of wanted to, kind of know what was going on. And so one day, a friend of mine invited me to go. And so this van drives up, and the horn honks, and all the kids come running out, and we hop in the van, and we went to this minister's house. His name was Ted Travis, and they had cake and ice cream and cookies and Atari game, a lot of the stuff that I wasn't allowed to have at home, he had. And so we went and just had a great time. But then about 30 minutes later, he would bring everyone into the living room, and he had this wooden rocking chair. And he'd sit in the rocking chair, and all the kids would just sit around him, and he'd open up the Bible, and he'd start talking about the Bible, God and Christ, and what God had done. And it was good. But I remember leaving there that day, just thinking that I wouldn't go back because while God had done all of this, He couldn't have done it for me.
Yeah.
And so I left there saying that I would never go back. And yet the next week, I was back in the van going back. There was something that was shared, over the course of that week that just it kept tugging at me, kept tugging at me. And so yeah, the following week, I was back in the van, and just loved it. And so it was the summer of '82. I was invited to go to a youth camp up in the mountains called Camp Frontier. And I really didn't think that my dad would let me go. He had never let any of his kids, go outside of the city. And so, I pretty much was sure that I wouldn't go. Well, my dad, he told, Ted Travis that he would definitely let me go, if Ted brought me back home.
Wow.
And so Ted agreed, and I went to camp, and it was like it was like a scene out of the movies. We're in this van, driving up to camp, going up in the mountains, and you'll see a deer cross the road, and wildlife, and of course, coming from Denver,
Yeah.
the only wildlife we saw was dogs and cats. And so it was just kind of mind blowing. But then, I get up to this camp, And there's kids everywhere. There were very few African American kids, and actually, honestly, the only African American kids that were at the camp were the kids who were from my neighborhood. And so we get up there and had a great time. Wednesday, let me back up. Every evening, they would have worship time, and they're singing and playing music, and then every now and then, the music would stop, and someone would get up and they share their testimony, of how God had changed their life.
Yeah.
And I remember sitting there, just kind of thinking, in the back, I didn't know any Christian songs, I didn't have a testimony. And I just, remember thinking, I kind of wish I had a testimony, to share, how my life has changed. And that week on Wednesday, the youth pastor just, was sharing the gospel. And he said, if there's anyone in here who have not accepted Christ, it's pretty simple. This is what you do. And I remember leaving the building, and I just went outside and sat on a big rock, and it just overlooked meadow, and there was a beautiful bright moon out. And I sat there and I just thought about my life, just kind of thought about, the things that I had been in, my family life, my neighborhood life. And it was at that time that I prayed and asked Christ into my life. And it was awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, it was awesome.
What did that feel like?
Refreshing, relieving. Just felt like a huge weight was taken off of my shoulders.
Hmm.
And for the rest of the week, it was an awesome week.
Yeah, that's awesome. How old were you?
At that time, I was 13, 14.
Okay, great. Okay, so the week was awesome. What happened after that?
After that, Saturday, of course, we had to come back home. And that high that I was riding, took me all the way down to my city gates. And that's when I realized that, I was coming back home. And even though something within changed, I was still coming back home, same situation, the same family, the same city life, the same friends that hadn't changed.
Right.
And so one of the hardest things for me was coming back into a neighborhood where there was no ongoing mentoring or discipleship, from anyone else. And so I was basically taken away to camp every week, except Christ. But when I got back into my neighborhood, there was no one there for me.
Yeah, I was wondering about that. So what did you do? What happened?
You know what? I ended up going back into the old life that I was living.
Of course. That would be only be natural, right?
Yes. I mean, that would definitely be the natural thing. A newbie, a new Christian, who hasn't had any discipleship. Who doesn't have a strong system to follow, if you will. You're going to go back into the same situation that you were in.
Right. Okay. So tell us about that. Tell us about, well, how did you start to grow?
How did I start to grow?
Yeah.
My growth didn't come until several years later, when it was actually after I met my wife at another camp, Camp Elam. After I met my wife, we had started talking about marriage, and at that time, we both knew Ted Travis, and it's something how God just brings everything full circle. because Ted Travis, he was an individual that took me to these camps.
Yeah.
And she just happened to be at one of the camps that we met at. And so, we went and searched for Ted Travis, and he had said that before he married us, he wanted to take us through a marriage counseling. And I believe, if memory serves me well, I believe it was called God's Blueprint by Tony Evans.
Okay.
And so we went through the counseling, and of course, he ended up marrying us, and really that's when my life and faith started to grow in Christ, because that's when I entered the ministry field.
Oh, okay. Well, so something must have happened there between going into ministry and going back home into your sort of neighborhood gang. How did you realize that that's where you were going?
That's where I was going.
Yeah.
As far as going into ministry.
Yeah, like what was there a moment or a time when you were like, "Wait, I got to get out of here and I got to go to ministry," or what? How was that?
It wasn't really I have to get out of here. For me, I think it was more of just kind of standing back and looking at the situation that I was in, looking at what was going on around me, seeing the hopeless, if you will, the violence, and there comes a point, in one's life when you ask, is this what I want in life? Is this the kind of lifestyle I want to live?
Right.
And so then, my answer, of course, was no. And so I started distancing myself, from the fellas in the hood, if you will,
Yeah.
and started meeting with Ted Travis more often. There were some other, influential individuals, in my life that, as we met and as we studied, God's word, it made me stronger. It was giving me something. It was giving me hope. It was giving me the strength, if you will, to actually, pull away and be able to distance myself from that so that I could be used by God.
Yeah, so you started to be discipled.
That is correct.
That's what was happening. Okay, great.
That is correct.
Yeah. What do you remember? Like, do you remember a time that was kind of your, maybe not your first or a time anyway, when during that discipleship time when you really like grasped a truth about God or something that they were saying that you went, oh wow, and just kind of blew your mind?
Yeah, early in my ministry, youth ministry, there was a good friend of mine, Bill Glover. And Bill Glover at the time was probably one of the very few Caucasians living in the Five Points back when I was a teenager. And again, it's amazing how God brings things full circle. My first time meeting Bill Glover, I was a junior I was a senior in high school. And Bill Glover, he stayed two houses down from my parents. And one day, my dad had a stroke. And Bill Glover, I remember he came out of his house. He had his daughter on his shoulder. He came out of his house and he put his hand on my shoulder and said, everything will be okay. Everything will be okay. He didn't say anything about God or anything. He just said everything will be okay.
Yeah.
Well, years later, the next time that our paths crossed, it was when I was in youth ministry. And Bill Glover, he had agreed to disciple me. And so I agreed, of course, and so every morning at 6 o'clock, I would meet at his house, and we would study the Bible. But there was one book in particular that he took me through. It was a book that was written by R.C. Sproul's,
Yeah.
"The Essential Truth of the Christian Faith,"
Nice.
and that right there was the beginning of my understanding of Christianity,
Yeah.
of God, of Christ, of faith. And I still have the book right now on my
Nice.
on my bookcase.
Oh, that's great. So he took you through that book to kind of give you the foundation that you needed for the Christian life.
That is correct.
Yeah. That's
That is
good.
correct.
Well, it sounds like you had some really great people invest in you.
I did. I did. Again, Ted Travis, Bill Glover. There were several, men and women who really, gave time and invested in my life, and that's a big part of, who I am today.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
And it's something. It's very, very important. I believe that each one should teach one.
yeah, absolutely. Well, what I'm learning from that is, number one, never underestimate the value of giving a little bit of time to a young believer, right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
also, I have a feeling that leads you in a certain way to also give of yourself, because I kind of know where your ministry goes.
Correct.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool.
Yes, that is correct. Again, I believe in giving back that which you have received. It doesn't matter, what that is. And so, if just as I was discipled, then I believe that I am also called to disciple the next person coming up.
Yeah, absolutely. So important. Okay, so that's your ministry. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that? You said so you met your wife Andrea,
Correct. Correct. I
and
met my wife.
yeah, go ahead at camp.
Yeah. Yes. 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 We met at Camp Elam. We were married in August of 1990. In 91, in 92, I went full time with Neighborhood Ministries, which was a local ministry that I came through down in Denver. And we served as the directors for the youth program there until 97. In 97, we felt God's calling for us to leave mother, father, sister, brother, leave family, and move to Texas. And we were going to move there to help start uh, a a um, a ministry that really wasn't connected with kids. It was more of serving the elderly, doing yard work and that kind of stuff. And so we did. In '97, August of '97, we loaded up the U-Haul, said goodbye to family and friends, and moved to Texas, knowing no one. And when we got there, it was apparent that what we thought God was taking us there for wasn't. Um, every time when we would go down in the neighborhoods to talk to homeowners about putting lights in their yard, I would find myself out in the streets playing with the kids. Who had a soccer ball or a football, and so I would go over and I start playing, with these kids out in the street because there was no one else there. There was no one there reaching out to the youth in that area. And after praying about it, we really believed that God was actually calling us there for the youth in the community, not to put up lights. And so after talking with some people, we decided to start a 501c3, Cornerstone Community Ministries. And we served in a neighborhood called Fraser Community for 12 years.
Wow, that what an interesting story. So basically, you can take the boy out of the neighborhood, but not the neighborhood out of the boy.
That is correct.
And you,
Right. That is correct. That is correct. Again, it's all about uh, when you go through life growing up in inner city, and when you walk the streets alone, you know,
Mhm.
uh, you know that a lot of the other people out there that you're seeing that they're going through the same thing that I went through.
Yeah. Well,
You know,
what I love about that, Jimmy, is how like who else, how many other people could have been there and seen these kids and understood what they were experiencing.
right?
I mean, not many other people, and especially, so you're there and you're realizing, hey, these guys need some attention, and you give it to them and you play with them, and that means the world to them, no doubt. I'm sure.
Oh yes,
And
oh yes,
and then you realize, oh, okay, this is maybe what God's calling me to do, because
hmm
I'm sure your heart at the same time was just lighting up.
yes, yes. Yes, my heart was on fire.
Yeah.
It was on fire. It was hard because the community that we were in, I remember when we first went down and started passing out flyers, just to let people know that we're going to start this little, good news gang, ministry, in that neighborhood. But there was really no place for us to meet. I mean, we're talking about a very ran down neighborhood. There was one church there that had a very big field, and so the pastor had agreed to let us use the field, but of course, we had to mow it. And so after we mowed it, we had to pick up all the drug needles,
Oh
the
no.
broken glass, the ammunition, shellings. I mean, we had to clear out a space just for us to even play soccer down there.
Wow.
But we were willing to do that in hopes of just reaching one child for Christ.
Yeah. Wow. Most of us can't even imagine that. You know, having to clean up all that stuff
Yes.
in a neighborhood. My goodness.
Yeah, it was a really, really, again, scary situation because, here we are, no friends, no family really down there, didn't really know anyone, and yet, we're stepping out. We had said that, we're going to give this, 5 years. We made that commitment, and so, the next thing for us to do was just to, get to work.
Yeah. Okay. So God called you out. What did you do? Like, what happened in those 5 years?
In those 5 years turned into 12
Uh
years,
huh.
and what wow, what did God do? God, um, wow, God showed up. Let me say, God showed up. When we started the ministry, it was probably about 50% African American, 50% Hispanic. By the time at the end of the 12 years, we were probably running about 95% Hispanic. And so the cool thing about that is, I know very little English. I mean, Spanish.
Yeah.
I know very little Spanish, and the families that we worked with, the parents, they didn't speak English at all. And there were a very few that had that could speak a little English, but it wasn't really clear. So in terms of um, um, communicating with the parents, we had to use the kids. And sometimes that was kind of scary, because you weren't really sure if the child was relaying to the parent exactly what I was saying. But what God gave us in those years was a family.
Hmm.
God gave us the family that we didn't have there. And oh, we didn't have a building that was ours. Someone else let us use the building. So we would run summer program, and this building was probably 800 square feet, if that. And every summer we would run a program with about 100 kids uh, for about 6 weeks. And so if you can imagine 100 kids plus about 15 to 20 volunteers in about a 400 square foot home,
Wow.
no no in Texas, 100 degrees
Yeah,
plus, heat.
that's hot.
There were some miserable days. It was tough. It was tough. But to see the smiles on the kids' face, to see them light up when they recite a Bible verse, to see them sing, songs that they had never heard before about Christ, it was awesome.
That is awesome. So do you have I'm just curious, do you have like your own Jimmy? Like somebody that you can look at and go, "You know what? He was in the same situation I was and I led him to Christ and God is doing great things in him because of what he called us to do."
Yeah, there are several.
That's cool.
There are several. We are not. We um, our job is to sow the seed.
Yeah.
Okay, our job is to share the gospel. But in terms of that, growing in a child's life, in terms of that seed, sprouting, and pro- producing, that's God's work.
Yeah.
That is God's work. Um, Obedience, on what He has called me to do. What my role was. The goal was to show up, was to uh, uh, you know share the gospel. You know, but in doing so, love on the kids. Let them know that they are valued. That there is someone out there who loves them, who believes in them, who thinks that they can become whatever they want to, a doctor, lawyer, whatever.
Yeah.
You know,
What important work. I wonder, I know that sometimes in the middle of all that, um it can get challenging for you. It can get kind of lonely, especially in an environment where you may feel like you're the only one. Did you ever have like a wall experience or a time when it felt like God wasn't there or he was far away or anything like that?
um,
It doesn't have to have been during that time, but I'm curious.
sure. I think most of the experiences I've had, as far as just kind of like that wall experience, with God, where are you? Um, it would. I, I would say that th- in working with the families that we worked with, it's a beautiful thing to see a cry or a life come to Christ. It's a beautiful thing to see the eyes of a youth or a child light up. When they've again have given their life to Christ, and they believe that that they are a new person. You know, what's hard is when you send that child home
Mm.
into a situation that again, that hasn't changed. And so, you're thinking, okay, Lord, where are you? And then that child comes back the next day and they're saying, oh, well, I'm not sure about this because, I go home, and, it's
Yeah.
like the same thing, or, well, if God is for me, then why hasn't He changed? You know what I'm saying? My
Yep.
situation. And I mean that can be hard. And so yes, there have been times when it's been like, okay, Lord, you know, it's all good, but there are times when it's like He wasn't there.
Yeah.
And you hit that wall, and then you start questioning, well, what is all this for? If God's changing this life, why not change the family life and all of that? And again, it takes time. God's timing is not ours. What I want to see happen now, uh, as He showed me, wasn't going to happen right there and then.
Yeah.
But over time, my eyes were opened up to exactly how God was changing the lives of the parents. It was through the kids.
Yeah. And
It
you
was
know
through the
what?
kids.
I've heard those stories too. One just came to mind that this lady who her name is Carol Wilson. I had her on the show. You can go back in the show notes and find it. But her parents came to Christ at a Billy Graham crusade in Des Moines.
Mm-hmm.
And that, well, I'm sorry, she and her brother, I think, came to Christ at church, and then they ended up going to the Billy Graham concert crusade because of them. But anyway, it happens all the time, right? Where the kids come to Christ, and then He
Right.
changes the family. So,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Mm-hmm. Yes.
absolutely.
Yes. Yeah. My goal and my desire has always been um, to reach uh, the whole family, if you will. And so, someone has uh, said that, Jimmy, the the process, if you will, that you're going through is that God has gifted you, with children. You can communicate. You can um, um, you work well, with children, with youth. But for me, I want to reach the whole family. So if I have to go through the back door, if you will, with those kids, in order to get to the parents, then so be it.
Yeah,
Because I believe that, God, He doesn't just want, the hearts of the children, He wants the hearts of the parents as well.
yeah, absolutely. Wow, that's a sounds like a great mission, a really important one.
Yes. Yeah,
Um,
I believe so.
well, yeah, of course you do, and I do too. And I think I just really admire what God's done there. I want to know what do you? So you eventually moved back to Denver. What? How'd that happen? And then what are you doing now?
Mm. You know, our move back to Colorado um, came about when a child who was actually one of the first kids on the field when we started the ministry in Texas. She was, I believe, she was a second grader, and this was a family who. Um, It was about five. Let me see. There were four siblings, so it was a family of six, and all of the siblings or all of the kids were members of our ministry. Um, but Crystal, being the youngest at second grader and the oldest when she started our program, she was a sixth grader. Sixth grader, I do believe. Um, but Crystal was a child who grew up in a pretty rough home. Alcohol, drugs, violence. And I remember being told one day that she would end up being just like her uncles and aunties and parents, um, an alcoholic, and most likely a drug user. And her words was, because that's what my family is.
Oh wow, so she's telling you that.
She's telling me this. That
Wow.
is correct. She's telling me this, and she was, a little. I think when she mentioned those words to me, I think she was a fifth grader,
Oh man.
and she said, I don't think I'll ever graduate high school. I know I'll never go to college. You know, uh, Again, this is the life that has been given to me.
Yeah, so she's feeling hopeless. What did you say?
She's feeling hopeless again. You know, it wasn't really what I said. It was more of us being there.
Mm.
It was more of us being there as we went on, as we, journeyed through God's word. you know, we started, she started seeing that yes, there is hope. But also, just kind of sharing with her, my story, you know,
Yeah.
because there was a time where I didn't believe that I would live to be 21. You
Wow.
know, there was a time when I thought I would never go to college because people always told me, Jimmy, you will never go to college, because you stutter, or you're not smart enough, you're not good enough, and so you start to believe those lies. And so this young girl, she was doing the same thing. She was believing the lies of others and of what she was seeing. And so, every week, she kept coming to club. And every week, we would, go through God's word, but we would love on her and we would encourage her, and we would let her know, if it's something that you want, you can do it. You don't have to be what everyone else says you're going to be. You know, you know, you don't have to go down that road. And so your question was, how did I know that my time was up there? It was when this young girl, it was when she graduated high school
Wow.
and she got accepted to the University of Austin, UT Austin, University of Texas at Austin. And when that happened, when we being me and my wife, attended her graduation, high school graduation, and then seeing her acceptance letter into college, that was pretty much you know the writing on the wall. It was kind of like, what, our mission there was complete.
We did it.
We did it, because there were several younger kids, who were still in club, but it was like that the original crew that God gave us, and the youngest being Crystal. When she graduated, and she wasn't the only one to graduate high school and go on to college. I think out of that crew, wow, there were many that actually that graduated high school. Some didn't go to college. Some just went ahead and just got regular jobs. But just seeing them, believe in themselves and apply themselves in a way that that in the end, they accomplished something that they never thought would happen. Yet in the process, through that journey, they came to know Christ. They were growing in Christ, and then they were seeking to serve others.
Yeah. And all of that sets them up for a much better trajectory in life than what they
Yeah,
otherwise would have had.
that is correct.
Yeah.
That is correct.
Awesome.
And so yeah, so shortly after that, that happened. It just think we were wanting to get back to Colorado. We had just sensed that our purpose there for what God had brought us there for was complete, and so doors opened up. Clearly, it was God's way of as far as I took it, as saying, okay, you can go home now. Because one of the things that I did um, when I left Colorado in in '97, I felt God calling me, and I felt God calling me to leave, Denver, to leave Colorado, to leave, my birthplace. And I remember sitting on the front porch of my house, and I remember just praying to God, just saying, Lord, I will go, I will go, but I hope that one day you would bring me back home, because being one of 13 children, and then my parents were here. I mean, every all my family was here, and so I wanted to be obedient to God's calling. Yet, my prayer was that one day He would see fit to just to bring me back home, and God did that. He honored that.
Oh, that's awesome. So And then did you pick up where you left off, or what'd you do when you came back? Because you still you're still ministering to kids, aren't you?
That is correct. That is
Yeah.
correct. When I came back here, the ministry that I had grew up in, neighborhood ministries, they were going in um, another di- direction, and it was more of equipping youth leaders, and so they still had their youth there, and so we came in and just pretty much picked up where they were ending, if you will, and so we yes. We started reaching out to the youth in the Denver area, and then as that changed, more and more of the kids started moving out because, of course, gen- gentrification.
Yep.
It's kind of hard to afford anything down in Denver right now. And
Yeah.
so, a lot of the kids started moving out east and started moving down south in the Inglewood Sheridan area. And so right now, we still meet with uh, children and youth in the Denver area as well as Sheridan.
Okay, so that's why you're in Sheridan.
That is correct. That is correct. Yes. Um, Sheridan really never came on the radar until a lot of the kids that we were working with were moving from Denver out to Sheridan because
Gotcha.
that's the only thing that they could really afford.
Yeah, I didn't realize that. That's not,
Yes.
because I knew Denver's expensive. It's expensive where we live down even further south, but um yeah, but very interesting. So but I didn't quite know where all those places were that people were going. And so that's where Sheridan. Um okay. What do you think people need to know about Denver and about what kids are going through, at least in that sort of strata?
Um, Even though Denver has changed, you still have your pockets of poor, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of great ministries down in Denver. There's a lot happening. Um, but with that said, there are still a lot of kids, in that area who aren't being reached.
Right.
Um, who are wanting to be loved, who are needing to be loved, who are looking for acceptance, and um, they're not getting it from the churches or the ministries. They're getting it from, the OGs, original gangsters. They're getting it from the gang members down there. And again, if you don't have a positive role model in your life, then you're going to go looking for someone to fill that void, if you will. And I know many countless youth, especially young males, they have gone and they found that role, that love, that acceptance in gangs.
Yeah, interesting. And and it gives them and if I'm wrong about this, you just tell me, but it seems to me, it sounds like it gives them a family in a way and a place to exercise their gifts, right? Or who they are. You know.
Well, yeah, correct. It gives them, like you said, it gives them that family that they don't have at home.
Yeah.
And so with they're again, they're looking for love, they're looking for acceptance, and there's people out there in the streets who are arms wide open, but
Yeah.
to be accepted into my crew, you have to do what we say.
Yeah.
And that's the thinking of behind a lot of the older gang members, who go out and recruit these younger kids because they know that their home life is a wreck.
Right. Right. So I guess what I want to know, I obviously I don't know everybody who listens to this, but believe that most of the people who do are probably more like, yeah, suburban and white and evangelical.
Hmm.
So, like, what can we do to offer to do more than just hear about this and go, "Oh, isn't that a shame?" You're like,
Mm.
what can we? Because that's the worst thing we could do. What could people who are in that sort of situation do that would be valuable or helpful either to you and your ministry directly
Mhm.
or to the city youth?
Yeah, I would just encourage people to, get involved. Again, there's a lot of great ministries out there who are doing great work, who are just really allowing God to use them to reach out to the families that they serve. Um, I think um, one thing to really be careful about, and it's one of the reasons that you know we don't really use a lot of volunteers. I mean, for Cornerstone Ministries,
Yeah.
the best way really that someone could help out is to bake cookies.
Yeah.
Bake cookies. Kids love cookies. Snacks. Provide stuff like that. One of the issues that we have and that we've seen in my 27 plus years of ministry is that a lot of our kids, the majority of our kids that we work with, like we said, they come from broken homes. And so they live in a world where there is always a revolving door. Someone's in, someone's out, someone's
Right.
in, someone's out. There's never really a relationship built there. It's a revolving door. And so while, some people's intentions are good in terms of, maybe wanting to help, a ministry, they need to keep in mind that, if you're going to come in for, a couple of weeks or whatever, I mean, these kids will latch onto you,
Right. So
you know,
what I hear you saying is what's not helpful is to volunteer once. If,
that is correct.
if you're,
That
or,
is correct.
just but we can give of our abundance, right? So if whether that's extra food
Sure.
or like you're saying, or even extra cash. I'm sure your ministry can always use that extra cash.
I mean,
You know, that would be
yes, yes,
helpful.
yes, yes. I mean, definitely, Cornerstone Ministries is a nonprofit, and so, donations is always welcome.
Okay.
But like I said, food, snacks, anything, that would help, with the weekly programs, that would be great. But in terms of wanting to really get involved, like on the ground, then we do ask that that individual would really consider making a long-term commitment
Yeah,
for sure.
which completely makes sense. Okay, so good news is it may not necessarily require you to add something to your busy schedule, but it does require us to think and be aware and try to at least go a little out of our way to offer something, some resources,
Yes,
whether financial
yes,
or food, or just being aware of what's happening and the people who are there,
yes,
knowing the people who
yeah,
are there, which is why I appreciate you coming here and sharing your story, because I love to know what you're doing and how the kind of things that we can do that are most helpful to you.
sure.
So cool. Wow. What anything else you want to leave us with?
Uh, no.
All right. So if
I mean,
people if people yeah, sorry, go
yeah,
ahead.
yeah. Well, I was just gonna say. I mean, if there's one thing, that I can leave, um, is that um, there's always someone out there in need. There's someone who is looking for a mentor. Especially a young believer. There's someone out there who wants to grow in their faith and who wants to be used. But don't know how to. And so, I would just, again, encourage people to um, don't write anyone off.
Yeah, that's great. Don't write anyone off. And I think, Jimmy, you are living proof that, if we invest our time to disciple and help people who have come to Christ understand what it means to live in Christ and what God has revealed of both himself and who we are in him, that it can be really powerful, and that can create ripples of the gospel, I like to call them.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Amen. All right. Jimmy, thanks for coming. Thanks for sharing your story. I appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for having me.